The black car pulled up slowly to the front of Lincoln Center. The driver got out and walked around to open the back door. Robert De Niro stepped out onto the sidewalk. He was wearing a simple black suit with a white shirt. His gray hair was combed back neatly. At 80 years old, he still looked strong and confident. The Lincoln Center was one of the most famous places in New York City. Tonight, it was hosting a special charity event. The money raised would help kids from poor families learn about acting, music, and dance. Many rich people and famous actors were coming to donate money. Robert looked up at the tall building. He had been here many times before. He remembered performing on these stages when he was young. Back then, he was just starting his career. Now, he was one of the most famous actors in the world. People were walking into the building dressed in expensive clothes. Women wore long dresses and shiny jewelry. Men wore dark suits and bow ties. Everyone looked important. But Robert preferred to dress simply. He never liked to show off. As he walked toward the entrance, a few people recognized him. They whispered to each other and pointed. Some tried to take pictures with their phones. Robert smiled politely but kept walking. He was used to this attention after 50 years of being famous. A young woman with a clipboard approached him. She was one of the event organizers. Her name was Sarah, and she looked nervous but excited. "Mr. De Niro, thank you so much for coming tonight," she said. "Your support means everything to these kids." "It's my pleasure," Robert replied in his quiet voice. "Education is important. Art is important. Kids need both." Sarah led him through the lobby. The walls were covered with photos of famous performers who had appeared here over the years. Robert saw pictures of great singers, dancers, and actors. Some of them were his friends. Some had died years ago. It made him think about how time moved so fast. They walked into the main hall where the party was happening. The room was huge and beautiful. Crystal lights hung from the ceiling. Round tables were set up with white cloths and fresh flowers. A small stage was at the front of the room where speakers would talk later. About 300 people were already there. They stood in small groups, talking and drinking wine. Waiters moved through the crowd carrying trays of fancy food. Everyone looked happy and relaxed. Robert preferred to stay in the background at events like this. He was not like some actors who loved being the center of attention. He came here to support the cause, not to be seen. But people noticed him anyway. "Is that Robert De Niro?" someone whispered. "Oh my God, it really is him," another person said. Soon a small crowd began to form around him. People wanted to shake his hand and tell him how much they loved his movies. Robert was polite to everyone, but he kept his answers short. "Thank you," he would say. "I appreciate that." Sarah noticed that Robert was getting surrounded. She gently helped him move to a quieter area near the back of the room. There he could see everything that was happening without being bothered too much. Near the wall, Robert spotted a group of young people. They looked different from the other guests. They were wearing nice clothes, but not expensive ones. These were the students that the charity helped. They were between 15 and 20 years old, and they all looked excited to be there. One of the students, a teenage girl with curly hair, noticed Robert looking their way. Her eyes got wide with surprise. She nudged her friend, a tall boy standing next to her. "That's Robert De Niro," she whispered loudly. The boy looked over and his mouth dropped open. Soon all 6 students were staring at Robert. They seemed scared to approach him, but they clearly wanted to meet him. Robert smiled and walked over to them. The students looked nervous as he got closer. "Hello," he said in his calm voice. "Are you the students from the program?" The girl with curly hair nodded quickly. "Yes, sir. I'm Maria. This is James, and that's Kevin and Sarah and David and Lisa." Each student waved when their name was said. They all looked like they could not believe they were meeting their hero. "What are you studying?" Robert asked. "I want to be an actress," Maria said. "I love your movies. Taxi Driver is my favorite." "That's a heavy movie for someone your age," Robert said with a small smile. "I know, but it's so real. It shows what acting can really do. It can make people feel things and think about important stuff." Robert nodded. He was impressed by how smart Maria was. Most people her age just liked action movies or comedies. But Maria understood that acting could be art. James spoke up next. "I'm studying directing. I watched Goodfellas like 20 times. The way you and the other actors work together is amazing." "Martin Scorsese is a great director," Robert said. "He knows how to bring out the best in actors. Find directors like that. They will make you better." The students asked Robert more questions about acting and movies. He answered each one thoughtfully. He told them about working with famous directors and other actors. He explained how hard it was to make good movies. But he also told them how rewarding it could be. The most important thing, Robert said, is to be honest in your work. Don't try to be someone else. Find your own voice. The students listened carefully to every word. They knew they were getting advice from one of the greatest actors who ever lived. While Robert talked with the students, more guests kept arriving. The room was getting crowded and noisy. Photographers moved around taking pictures. TV cameras were set up to film parts of the event. Robert noticed some of the camera crews, but he did not pay much attention to them. He had been around cameras his whole career. They were just part of the business. The students were asking Robert about his early days as an actor when Sarah, the organizer, came back over to them. "Mr. De Niro, I'm sorry to interrupt," she said, "but we're about to start the program. Would you mind taking your seat at the head table?" Robert nodded. He turned back to the students. "It was great meeting all of you," he said. "Keep working hard. The world needs good artists." The students thanked him over and over as he walked away. They watched him go to the front of the room where a special table was set up for the most important guests. Robert sat down at his assigned seat. He looked around the room one more time. Everyone seemed happy and excited about the evening. The cause was good, and the people here truly wanted to help kids learn about art. He had no idea that in just a few minutes someone would try to ruin this peaceful evening. Someone who cared more about getting attention than about helping kids. Someone who thought it would be fun to embarrass an 80-year-old man in front of hundreds of people. But for now, Robert just sat quietly, thinking about the young students he had just met and hoping the evening would raise a lot of money for their education. Marcus Sterling pushed through the crowd at the entrance of Lincoln Center. He was 35 years old and dressed in an expensive gray suit. His blonde hair was perfectly styled and his teeth were bright white from professional whitening. He looked like he belonged at the charity event, but he was not there to help kids. Marcus worked for a TV show called Hollywood Insider. The show talked about famous people and often made fun of them. Marcus was known for asking rude questions and creating drama. His boss loved it because it got more people to watch the show. Tonight, Marcus was not working for his TV show. He was making content for his own social media accounts. He wanted to become famous on his own, not just as part of someone else's show. He thought the best way to do this was to embarrass famous people and film it. Marcus had his phone in his hand, ready to record. Walking next to him was his assistant, Jenny. She was 23 years old and new to the entertainment business. She carried Marcus's extra equipment and helped him plan his attacks on celebrities. "Remember," Marcus told Jenny as they walked in, "we need something big tonight, something that will get millions of views." Jenny nodded, but she looked uncomfortable. She had taken this job because she needed the money, but she did not like being mean to people. Still, she followed Marcus into the beautiful hall. Marcus looked around the room with hungry eyes. He saw many famous people, but most of them were talking in groups or sitting at tables. He needed someone who was alone or easy to approach. Then he spotted Robert De Niro. Marcus's eyes lit up like he had found treasure. Robert was sitting at the head table looking relaxed and peaceful. He was not surrounded by bodyguards or handlers like some celebrities. He looked like an easy target. "Perfect," Marcus whispered to Jenny. "Robert De Niro. He's old, he probably won't fight back and everyone will recognize him." Jenny felt sick to her stomach. "Marcus, maybe we should pick someone else. He's just sitting there peacefully. He's not bothering anyone." "That's exactly why he's perfect," Marcus said with a mean smile. "Old celebrities think they deserve respect just because they're famous. I'm going to show people that nobody is untouchable." Marcus had always been jealous of actors like Robert De Niro. While Marcus struggled to get attention by being loud and controversial, actors like Robert got respect for their talent. Marcus thought this was unfair. He believed that getting attention was more important than having talent. Marcus pulled out his phone and opened his video app. He checked his appearance in the front camera and fixed his hair. He practiced his mean smile a few times. Then he started walking toward Robert's table. "Turn on your camera too," he told Jenny. "We want to get this from different angles." Jenny reluctantly pulled out her phone, but she did not turn on the camera yet. She hoped Marcus would change his mind. As they got closer to Robert, other people at the event started to notice Marcus. Some recognized him from his TV show. A few people whispered to each other, wondering what he was doing there. Marcus loved the attention. He walked with more confidence, knowing that people were watching him. He wanted to make sure his attack on Robert would have a big audience. Robert was sitting quietly, reading the program for the evening's events. He did not notice Marcus approaching until the younger man was almost at his table. "Jenny, start recording now," Marcus whispered. Then he raised his voice so people around them could hear. Well. Look who we have here." Robert looked up from his program. He saw a man with blonde hair and a big smile standing in front of him. Robert did not recognize Marcus, but he could tell something was wrong. The man's smile looked fake and his eyes looked mean. "I'm sorry, do I know you?" Robert asked politely. "Oh, you will in a few minutes," Marcus said, still smiling. He held up his phone so the camera was pointing at Robert. "I'm Marcus Sterling from Hollywood Insider. Maybe you've heard of me?" Robert shook his head. "I don't watch much television." This made Marcus angry, but he kept smiling. He had expected Robert to know who he was. He had hoped to impress people by showing that even famous actors knew his name. "That's okay, Bobby," Marcus said, using a nickname that only Robert's close friends used. "You're about to be on my show anyway." Robert did not like being called Bobby by a stranger. His real friends called him that, but this man was clearly not a friend. Robert started to feel suspicious about what was happening. "I don't think I agreed to be interviewed," Robert said calmly. "Oh, this isn't really an interview," Marcus said. His smile was getting bigger and meaner. "This is more like a public service announcement." People at nearby tables were starting to pay attention. They could hear Marcus talking loudly and could see him pointing his phone at Robert. Some of them pulled out their own phones, sensing that something interesting was about to happen. Marcus noticed the growing audience and felt excited. This was exactly what he wanted. The more people who watched, the more famous his video would become. "You see, folks," Marcus said, now talking to his phone camera, but making sure his voice was loud enough for everyone around to hear. "We have a perfect example here of what's wrong with Hollywood today." Robert still sat calmly, but his eyes were getting harder. He was starting to understand that this man was trying to cause trouble. Robert had dealt with difficult reporters before, but usually they were more professional about it. An actor who thinks he's still relevant just because he was in a few good movies 30 years ago. Marcus continued. "Tell me, Bobby, when was the last time you made a movie that anyone actually wanted to see?" Now Robert knew for sure that this man was trying to attack him. But Robert had learned long ago not to let people make him angry in public. He took a deep breath and stayed calm. The people around them were getting uncomfortable. This was supposed to be a nice charity event, not a place for someone to be mean to an elderly actor, but they were also curious to see what would happen next. Jenny watched from behind Marcus, feeling terrible about what was happening. She wanted to tell Marcus to stop, but she was afraid of losing her job. She also knew that Marcus would not listen to her anyway. Marcus could see that he had everyone's attention now. The room was starting to get quiet as more people noticed what was happening. Some people were moving closer to get a better view. Others were pointing their phones in Robert's direction. "This is perfect," Marcus thought to himself. "Everyone is watching. This is going to be the biggest thing I've ever done." Marcus looked at Robert, who was still sitting calmly despite being insulted. Marcus expected the old actor to either get angry or walk away. Either reaction would make good content for his video, but Robert just sat there looking at Marcus with steady eyes. This made Marcus feel like he needed to be even more insulting to get a reaction. "Are you going to answer my question, Bobby?" Marcus said, moving his phone closer to Robert's face. "Or are you too old to remember your last good movie?" Robert slowly reached for his glasses, which were sitting on the table next to his program. He picked them up and cleaned them with a small cloth. Then he put them back on and looked directly at Marcus. "Young man," Robert said in his quiet voice, "I think you might be at the wrong event. This is a charity dinner for children's education, not a place for whatever it is you're trying to do." Marcus laughed loudly. "Oh, I'm exactly where I need to be, and I'm doing exactly what needs to be done. Someone needs to tell the truth about washed-up actors who won't admit their time is over." The room was now almost completely quiet. Everyone was watching to see what would happen between the young TV personality and the legendary actor. Some people looked angry at Marcus for being so rude. Others seemed excited to see a confrontation. Robert could feel all the eyes on him. He knew that whatever he did next would be recorded and probably seen by millions of people. He thought about the young students he had met earlier. He thought about the charity and the good work it was trying to do. He also thought about all the young reporters and TV people he had met over the years who thought being mean was the same thing as being important. Marcus was still talking, getting louder and more insulting with each word, but Robert was no longer really listening to what Marcus was saying. Instead, Robert was thinking about what he was going to do next. Marcus Sterling felt the power of having everyone's attention. The whole room was watching him and Robert De Niro. People had stopped eating and talking. All eyes were on their table. Marcus decided this was the perfect time to really embarrass the famous actor. "Ladies and gentlemen," Marcus announced loudly, turning to face the crowd while keeping his phone camera pointed at Robert. "We have a real treat here tonight. The great Robert De Niro is gracing us with his presence." Marcus said "great" in a way that made it sound like a joke. Some people in the crowd looked shocked by his rude tone. Others seemed uncomfortable but could not look away. "Now I know what you're all thinking," Marcus continued, speaking like he was hosting a TV show. "You're thinking, wow, Robert De Niro? He must be here because he has something important to say. But I'm here to tell you the truth about Bobby here." Robert sat perfectly still, watching Marcus perform. He could see that the young man was enjoying himself. Marcus thought he was winning some kind of game. "The truth is," Marcus said, moving closer to Robert's chair, "that Mr. De Niro here hasn't made a good movie in over 15 years, maybe 20 years. Tell me, Bobby, what happened to the actor who made Taxi Driver and Goodfellas? Did he retire and forget to tell anyone?" A few people in the crowd made uncomfortable laughing sounds. They were not really amused, but they did not know how to react to such a strange situation. Marcus heard the nervous laughter and thought people were enjoying his show. This made him feel even more confident. He decided to be even crueler. "I mean, look at him," Marcus said, pointing his phone directly at Robert's face. 80 years old and still trying to pretend he's a tough guy. "Bobby, when you look in the mirror, do you still see Travis Bickle from Taxi Driver? Because the rest of us just see a tired old man who doesn't know when to quit." Robert's jaw tightened slightly, but he still did not speak. He was thinking about all the young actors he had worked with over the years. He was thinking about how the movie business had changed. But mostly he was thinking about how sad it was that someone would choose to be cruel just to get attention. Marcus saw that Robert was not responding and decided to try a different approach. He started doing an impression of Robert's voice from his movies. "You talking to me?" Marcus said in a fake New York accent, copying Robert's famous line from Taxi Driver. "Are you talking to me? Because if you are, I have to tell you, the answer is nobody's listening anymore." Marcus laughed at his own joke. A few more people in the crowd made uncomfortable sounds, but most people just stared in silence. "Oh, and what about this one?" Marcus continued, now imitating Robert's voice from Goodfellas. "As far back as I can remember, I always wanted to be relevant. But now as far forward as I can see, I never will be again." Marcus was very pleased with himself. He thought he was being clever and funny. He did not notice that most people in the room looked disgusted by his behavior. Jenny, Marcus's assistant, stood behind him feeling sick. She wanted to run away, but she was afraid to move. She had never seen her boss be so mean to someone who was just sitting quietly. "You know what the funniest part is?" Marcus said, still recording everything on his phone. "All these people paid good money to come to this fancy dinner, and they have to sit here and look at you pretending to be important. It's like going to a museum and having to stare at a painting that's faded and cracked and should have been thrown away years ago." This time, no one laughed at all. Marcus was going too far and everyone could feel it. Some people started whispering angrily to each other. Others shook their heads in disapproval, but Marcus did not notice the change in the crowd. He was too focused on his phone camera and on trying to make Robert react. "Tell you what, Bobby," Marcus said, sitting down in an empty chair next to Robert without being invited. "Why don't you do us all a favor and just admit it? Admit that you're past your prime. Admit that you haven't been good at acting for years. Admit that you're just here tonight because someone felt sorry for you." Robert finally turned to look directly at Marcus. For the first time since the attack began, Robert's eyes met Marcus's eyes. Marcus felt a little scared by what he saw there, but he tried not to show it. "Come on," Marcus said, his voice getting a little higher. "Don't just sit there like a statue. Say something. Defend yourself. Or are you too old to remember how to talk?" The room was completely silent now. Even the waiters had stopped moving. Everyone was watching to see what Robert De Niro would do. Some people in the crowd were getting angry at Marcus. They came to this event to support children's education, not to watch someone be cruel to an elderly actor. A few people started to stand up like they wanted to stop Marcus themselves, but Robert held up one hand slightly, a small gesture that somehow told everyone to wait and let him handle this. Marcus saw the gesture and misunderstood it. He thought Robert was giving up or asking for mercy. "Oh, now he wants to surrender," Marcus said to his camera. "Look at this, folks. The tough guy from all those movies can't handle a little criticism from someone who tells the truth." Marcus was feeling very proud of himself. He thought he had defeated a famous actor in front of hundreds of people. He imagined how many views his video would get when he posted it online. "You know what, Bobby?" Marcus said, standing up and looking down at Robert. "I actually feel sorry for you. It must be hard being a has-been. It must be hard knowing that your best days are behind you. It must be hard knowing that young people today don't even know who you are." Robert continued to sit calmly, but now he was also studying Marcus carefully. He was watching how the young man moved and talked. He was listening to the tone of his voice. He was trying to understand what kind of person would do something like this. "I'll make you a deal," Marcus said, now speaking directly to Robert instead of to his camera. "If you can name one good movie you've made in the last 10 years, I'll apologize and leave you alone. Just one movie that people actually went to see and enjoyed. Can you do that?" Marcus waited for an answer, holding his phone up to capture Robert's response. The whole room waited too. Robert slowly reached for the glass of water next to his plate. He took a small sip and set the glass back down. Then he looked up at Marcus again. "Are you finished?" Robert asked quietly. It was the first time Robert had spoken since the attack began. His voice was calm and steady, like he was asking about the weather. Marcus was surprised by the question. He had expected Robert to either get angry or to try to answer his challenge. He had not expected such a simple, direct question. "Finished?" Marcus repeated. "I'm just getting started, old man. I could do this all night." Robert nodded slowly like he was thinking about something important. "I see," Robert said. Then he went quiet again. Marcus felt confused. He had been in control of the situation, but now something felt different. Robert's calmness was making Marcus feel unsure of himself. The people in the room could feel the change too. Something was about to happen, but no one knew what it would be. Marcus tried to get back in control by being even more insulting. "What's wrong, Bobby? Cat got your tongue? Or did you finally realize that I'm right about everything I said?" But even as Marcus said these words, he could feel that the energy in the room had shifted. Robert De Niro was no longer just sitting there taking the abuse. He was preparing to do something. Marcus kept his phone camera running, but for the first time since he started his attack, he felt a little bit afraid of what might happen next. The room felt heavy with tension. 300 people sat and stood in complete silence, watching the strange scene between Marcus Sterling and Robert De Niro. The beautiful charity dinner had turned into something nobody expected. At table 5, Mrs. Catherine Williams, a wealthy woman in her 70s, put down her wine glass with shaking hands. She had donated $50,000 to the charity tonight, and she was furious about what was happening. "This is disgusting," she whispered to her husband. "How dare that young man treat Mr. De Niro this way? Doesn't he have any respect?" Her husband, Dr. James Williams, nodded angrily. "Someone should stop this. This is supposed to be about helping children, not embarrassing elderly actors." At the next table, a group of younger donors were pulling out their phones. They started recording Marcus's attack on Robert. Some of them were taking videos to post on social media. Others were recording because they could not believe what they were seeing. "This is crazy," said Tom Chen, a 30-year-old tech worker. "I can't believe someone would do this at a charity event. This Marcus guy must be insane." His girlfriend, Lisa Park, was recording on her phone. "I'm getting this all on video. People need to see how terrible this man is being." Near the back of the room, the 6 students that Robert had talked to earlier were watching in shock. Maria, the girl who wanted to be an actress, had tears in her eyes. "I can't believe this is happening," she said to her friend James. "Mr. De Niro was so nice to us. He doesn't deserve this." James was clenching his fists. He was only 17, but he was tall and strong. He wanted to go over and tell Marcus to stop being so mean. "We should do something," James said. "We can't just let this happen." But Kevin, another student, held his arm. "Wait, look at Mr. De Niro. He's not scared or upset. He's just watching, like he's planning something." The students looked more carefully at Robert. Kevin was right. Robert did not look like a man who was being defeated. He looked like a man who was thinking very carefully about what to do next. At the head table where Robert was sitting, the other important guests were very uncomfortable. The mayor of New York was there, along with several famous business people and actors. They all wanted to help Robert, but they did not know how. Sarah, the event organizer, was standing near the stage. She looked terrified. This was the biggest event her charity had ever held, and it was being ruined by one mean person. She tried to think of what to do. Should she call security? Should she ask Marcus to leave? But she was afraid that making a scene would only make things worse. What should we do? She asked her assistant, Mike. Mike was a young man who had helped organize many events. He had never seen anything like this before. I don't know, he said. If we try to stop him, he might just get louder and cause more trouble. Maybe we should let Mr. De Niro handle it himself. Meanwhile, Marcus was still talking and recording with his phone. He could see that everyone in the room was paying attention to him. This made him feel very important and powerful, but he could not see what other people were really thinking. He thought they were enjoying his show, but actually, most people were getting angrier and angrier at him. Jenny, Marcus's assistant, was standing behind him feeling horrible. She could see the faces of people in the crowd. They were not amused or entertained. They looked disgusted and angry. Marcus, she whispered, trying to get his attention. Maybe we should stop now. People are getting upset. But Marcus ignored her. He was too focused on his attack to pay attention to anything else. At table 12, a group of actors who had worked with Robert over the years were getting ready to stand up and defend their friend. I've had enough of this, said Frank Morrison, an actor who had appeared in 3 movies with Robert. I'm going to go over there and tell that punk to leave Bobby alone. Wait, said his wife Helen. Look at Robert. He doesn't want us to interfere. He wants to handle this himself. Frank looked across the room at Robert. Helen was right. Robert's body language was telling everyone to stay back and let him deal with Marcus on his own. But this is so hard to watch, Frank said. Bobby is one of the greatest actors who ever lived. He deserves better than this. At the bar, the bartenders had stopped serving drinks. They were all watching the confrontation like everyone else. I've been working events like this for 20 years, said the head bartender Carlos. I've never seen anything this rude and disrespectful. Should we call security? Asked one of the younger bartenders. Not yet, Carlos said. The old actor seems like he can take care of himself. Let's see what happens. The photographers and TV camera crews were having a difficult time deciding what to do. They were there to film the charity event, not a confrontation. But this was turning into the biggest story of the night. Some of them started filming Marcus and Robert, but they felt bad about it. They knew they were recording something that was meant to embarrass an elderly man. One of the photographers, David Kim, put down his camera. I'm not going to film this, he said to his partner. This is wrong. We shouldn't be helping this Marcus guy embarrass Mr. De Niro. But other camera crews kept filming. They knew that whatever happened next would be big news. The waiters who had been serving food stopped working and moved to the edges of the room. They wanted to watch what was happening, but they also wanted to be ready to help if things got worse. That young man is being very disrespectful, said Maria Santos, a waitress who had been working at Lincoln Center for 10 years. Mr. De Niro has always been polite and kind when he comes here. He doesn't deserve this treatment. Near the entrance to the room, 2 security guards were talking quietly. Should we go over there? Asked the first guard. Not unless someone asks for help, said the second guard. The old actor doesn't look like he wants us to interfere. As the tension in the room continued to build, people started to form opinions about what was happening. Some people were angry at Marcus for being so cruel. Others were impressed by Robert's calm reaction. A few people were just excited to see famous people in a confrontation, but most people were feeling the same thing. They wanted Marcus to stop being mean, and they wanted to see Robert De Niro defend himself. The students that Robert had talked to earlier were whispering among themselves. Mr. De Niro is so calm, said Lisa, one of the students. If someone was saying those things about me, I would be crying or yelling by now. That's what makes him a great actor, said David, another student. He knows how to control his emotions even when someone is being horrible to him. But this isn't acting, said Maria. This is real life. That Marcus person is really trying to hurt his feelings. I know, said David, but watch Mr. De Niro's eyes. He's not hurt. He's thinking, He's planning something. The students looked more carefully at Robert's face. David was right. Robert's eyes showed that he was not defeated or embarrassed. He looked like a man who was getting ready to do something important. All around the room, people were having similar thoughts. Marcus Sterling thought he was winning, but everyone else could see that Robert De Niro was preparing for something. The question was, what would Robert do? And when would he do it? The entire room held its breath, waiting to find out. Time seemed to stop in the beautiful hall at Lincoln Center. Robert De Niro sat perfectly still in his chair, looking at Marcus Sterling with steady, calm eyes. For what felt like forever, he said nothing. He did not move. He barely seemed to breathe. The silence was so complete that people could hear their own heartbeats. 300 people waited to see what the famous actor would do. Some people leaned forward in their chairs. Others held their breath. Everyone felt like something very important was about to happen. Marcus Sterling stood next to Robert's table, still holding his phone camera pointed at the actor's face. At first, Marcus felt proud of himself. He thought Robert's silence meant that he had won. He thought the old actor was too shocked or embarrassed to fight back. "Look at this, everyone," Marcus said to his camera, but his voice was not as loud as before. "The great Robert De Niro has nothing to say. Absolutely nothing." But as the silence continued, Marcus started to feel less confident. He had expected Robert to get angry or to walk away. He had expected some kind of reaction that would make good content for his video. Instead, Robert just sat there, completely calm and completely quiet. Marcus began to feel uncomfortable. The silence was making him nervous. He was used to people reacting when he attacked them. When people got angry or upset, it made him feel powerful. But Robert's silence was different. It felt dangerous. The longer Robert stayed quiet, the more nervous Marcus became. He started talking faster, trying to fill the silence. "What's wrong, Bobby? Did I hurt your feelings? Are you trying to think of something clever to say? Because I have to tell you, the longer you wait, the more foolish you look." But Robert still did not respond. He just kept looking at Marcus with those steady eyes. All around the room, people were starting to understand something that Marcus did not. Robert De Niro was not staying quiet because he was defeated. He was staying quiet because he was thinking. He was studying Marcus like a scientist studying an interesting but unpleasant insect. Maria, the student who wanted to be an actress, whispered to her friend James, "Look at his eyes. Mr. De Niro is not scared." "He's calculating," James nodded. "It's like he's an actor getting ready for the most important scene of his life." At table 5, Mrs. Catherine Williams was watching Robert with admiration. "That man has incredible self-control," she told her husband. "Most people would have lost their temper by now. But he's just thinking." "He's a professional," her husband replied. "He knows that whoever loses their temper first loses the fight." Robert was indeed thinking, but not about what Marcus might expect. He was not thinking about how to insult Marcus back or how to embarrass him. Instead, Robert was thinking about the young students he had met earlier. He was thinking about the charity and the good work it was trying to do. He was thinking about how this moment would be remembered. Robert had been in the movie business for over 50 years. He had dealt with difficult people many times. He had learned that the best way to handle someone who was trying to cause trouble was not to fight them on their level. The best way was to show them what real class and dignity looked like. As Robert sat in silence, he was also remembering all the great directors he had worked with. Martin Scorsese had taught him that the most powerful moments in movies often came not from big actions, but from small, quiet moments. The silence before the storm was often more dramatic than the storm itself. Francis Ford Coppola had taught him that a true professional never lets his personal feelings interfere with his work. Even when someone was being cruel or unfair, a professional stayed focused on what really mattered. Robert was applying these lessons now. This was not a movie set, but the same principles applied. He would not let Marcus's cruelty make him forget why he was here tonight. Marcus was still talking, but his voice was getting higher and more nervous. "You know what I think?" Marcus said, moving his phone closer to Robert's face. "I think you're scared. I think you know that everything I said about you is true, and you don't know how to defend yourself." Robert slowly reached for his glasses, which were sitting on the table next to his dinner plate. He picked them up and examined them carefully, as if he was seeing them for the first time. Then he pulled a small cleaning cloth from his jacket pocket. Everyone in the room watched as Robert cleaned his glasses with slow, careful movements. He held them up to the light to make sure they were completely clean. Then he put them back on his face and adjusted them until they sat perfectly. This simple action somehow changed the entire feeling in the room. People could sense that Robert was preparing for something. The way he cleaned his glasses was like a gunfighter checking his weapon before a duel. Marcus felt the change too, and it made him even more nervous. "What are you doing?" Marcus asked. "Are you trying to see me better so you can memorize my face?" "Because I'm not afraid of you, old man. You can't hurt me." But Robert's silence was becoming more powerful than any words could be. The longer he stayed quiet, the more foolish Marcus looked. The more Marcus talked, the more desperate he sounded. Jenny, Marcus's assistant, was watching her boss with growing concern. She could see that something was going wrong with his plan. Marcus was supposed to embarrass Robert De Niro, but instead, he was making himself look bad. "Marcus," she whispered urgently, "maybe we should go. I think we got enough footage." But Marcus ignored her. He was too focused on trying to get Robert to react. He could not understand why his usual tactics were not working. Around the room, people were starting to whisper to each other. "Look, how calm Mr. De Niro is," said one woman. "That Marcus fellow is making a fool of himself," said another person. "I can't wait to see what happens next," said a third. The event organizers were also watching carefully. Sarah, the main organizer, had stopped worrying about whether to call security. She could see that Robert was handling the situation in his own way. "He's going to do something," she told her assistant Mike. "I don't know what, but he's planning something." Mike nodded. "Should we be ready to help?" "No," Sarah said. "I think Mr. De Niro wants to handle this himself, and I think he knows exactly what he's doing." Robert finished adjusting his glasses and looked directly at Marcus again. His eyes were calm but very focused. It was the look of a man who had made a decision. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. For the first time since he started his attack, he wondered if he had made a mistake. There was something in Robert's eyes that made Marcus feel like a small child who had been caught doing something wrong. But Marcus was too proud to stop now. He had started this confrontation in front of hundreds of people. He could not back down without looking weak. "Well," Marcus said, his voice now clearly showing his nervousness. "Are you going to say something, or are you just going to sit there all night like a statue?" Robert took a slow, deep breath. Then, for the first time since Marcus had started his attack, Robert De Niro smiled. It was not a big smile. It was just a small, quiet smile that seemed to say, "I know something you don't know." That smile made Marcus feel more afraid than any angry words could have, because Marcus suddenly realized that Robert De Niro was not the victim in this situation. Marcus was. Robert De Niro stood up slowly from his chair. He was not a tall man, but when he rose to his full height, he seemed to fill the entire room. Every person in the hall felt his presence. The small smile was still on his face, but his eyes were serious and focused. Marcus Sterling took a step backward without realizing it. He was still holding his phone, still recording, but for the first time since he started his attack, he felt like he was in danger. Not physical danger, but something else, something worse. "Marcus," Robert said quietly, and his voice carried across the silent room like it was being spoken through the best sound system in the world. Marcus felt shocked. Robert knew his name, but how? Marcus had introduced himself earlier, but he had not expected Robert to remember or care. "Yes, Marcus Sterling from Hollywood Insider," Robert continued, taking a small step forward. "Age 35. Born in Cleveland, Ohio. Graduated from Ohio State University with a degree in communications. Started working in television 7 years ago." Marcus's mouth fell open. How did Robert know so much about him? Marcus had not told him any of these things. Robert saw the confusion on Marcus's face, and his small smile grew a little bigger. "You see, Marcus, when someone points a camera at me and starts asking questions, I like to know who I'm dealing with. So while you were busy talking, I was busy thinking and remembering. The crowd was listening to every word. People leaned forward in their chairs, fascinated by what was happening. I remember reading about you in Variety magazine last year," Robert continued, his voice still calm and quiet. "The article was about young television personalities who were trying to become famous by being controversial. You were mentioned as someone who attacks celebrities to get attention for yourself." Marcus felt his face getting red. He had been proud of that article when it was published, but hearing Robert talk about it made it sound shameful. "I also remember," Robert said, taking another small step forward. Reading about your ratings. Your show gets about 200,000 viewers on a good night. That's not very many people, Marcus. That's about the same number of people who come to see a small concert in a local theater. People in the crowd started to murmur. They were impressed by how much Robert knew about Marcus, and they were starting to understand that Robert had been planning his response all along. But you know what really interests me about you, Marcus? Robert continued. It's not your low ratings or your desperate need for attention. It's the fact that you came to a charity event tonight, an event to raise money for children's education, and you decided to use it as a place to attack an elderly man. Marcus tried to speak, but Robert held up one finger, asking for silence. Somehow, that simple gesture was more powerful than shouting. Now, I've been in this business for over 50 years, Robert said, his voice getting a little stronger. I've worked with Martin Scorsese when he was an unknown kid trying to make his first movie. I've worked with Francis Ford Coppola when people said his ideas were too strange. I've worked with Al Pacino and Joe Pesci when they were just young actors from New York trying to make it in Hollywood. The room was completely silent. Even the waiters had stopped moving. Everyone was listening to Robert like he was telling the most important story they had ever heard. I mentioned these names, Marcus, because I want you to understand something. These men became great not because they attacked other people, but because they created something beautiful. They made art that changed people's lives. They made movies that are still watched and loved 50 years later. Robert paused and looked directly into Marcus's phone camera. But you, Marcus, what are you creating? What are you building? What will people remember about you 50 years from now? Marcus tried to answer, but his voice came out as a squeak. I'm just doing my job. Robert nodded sadly. Your job? Yes, let's talk about your job. Your job is to make people feel bad about themselves so that other people will watch. Your job is to tear down instead of build up. Your job is to make the world a little bit meaner and a little bit sadder. The crowd was completely on Robert's side now. People were nodding in agreement with everything he said. Some people were even starting to look at Marcus with anger and disgust. You know what my job is, Marcus? Robert continued. My job is to tell stories that help people understand themselves and the world around them. My job is to work with other artists to create something that might last, something that might matter. Robert took another step forward, and Marcus took another step back. You came here tonight and you called me irrelevant. You said I was washed up. You said I was too old. And you know what? You might be right about some of those things. I am old, I'm 80 years old. I've been making movies since before you were born. Marcus thought Robert was admitting defeat, and he started to feel a little bit better. But here's what you don't understand. Son, Robert said, and the word son sounded both kind and disappointed at the same time. Age teaches you things that youth cannot learn. Experience gives you wisdom that talent alone cannot provide. Robert gestured toward the crowd of people watching them. Everyone in this room tonight came here for the same reason. They came here to help children learn about art and music and theater. They came here to give money so that kids who don't have much money can still learn to express themselves and follow their dreams. The crowd murmured in agreement. This was exactly why they had come to the charity dinner. But you, Marcus, you came here for a different reason. You came here to hurt someone. You came here to embarrass someone. You came here to use other people's kindness and generosity as a background for your own cruelty. Marcus was starting to look smaller and smaller. The confidence he had felt when he started his attack was completely gone. And that tells me something very important about you, Robert continued. It tells me that you don't understand what this business is really about. You think it's about fame and attention and getting people to notice you, but that's not what it's about at all. Robert's voice was getting stronger and more passionate, but he never raised it to a shout. He didn't need to. Every word was hitting its target. This business is about human connection. It's about telling stories that help people feel less alone in the world. It's about creating something beautiful that can bring joy and understanding to others. Robert looked around the room at all the people who were listening to him. Every person in this room tonight understands that. Every person here came to support young artists because they believe that art matters, that creativity matters, that helping others matters. Then Robert looked back at Marcus. Everyone except you. Robert De Niro looked at Marcus Sterling with the patience of a teacher, explaining something important to a confused student. The entire room felt the power of his words, but Robert was just getting started. You want to talk about relevance, Marcus? Robert said, his voice growing stronger with each word. Let me tell you about relevance. 3 weeks ago, I got a letter from a young woman in Detroit. She told me that watching Taxi Driver helped her understand her father, who came back from the war with problems that nobody talked about back then. Robert paused, letting this sink in before continuing. Last month, I met a man in Los Angeles who told me that Goodfellas helped him understand why his brother chose a life of crime and why he chose a different path. These movies were made decades ago, Marcus, but they're still helping people understand their lives today. Marcus tried to interrupt, but Robert's presence was so commanding that the words died in Marcus's throat. You asked me to name a good movie I've made in the last 10 years, Robert continued, but you're asking the wrong question. The right question is, what have I learned in the last 10 years? What have I given back? What have I built? Robert gestured toward the students who were watching from across the room. In the last 10 years, I've helped start 3 different programs that teach acting to kids who can't afford regular classes. I've worked with directors who were just starting out, trying to help them learn the same way older actors helped me when I was young. The crowd was hanging on every word. People were nodding, and some were even starting to smile as they realized how completely Robert was destroying Marcus's argument. In the last 10 years, I've appeared in movies that maybe weren't blockbusters, but they gave work to hundreds of other actors, cameramen, sound technicians, and all the other people who make movies possible, because that's what this business really is, Marcus. It's not about one person being a star. It's about a community of people working together to create something. Robert's voice was getting more passionate, but he still never shouted. Every word was clear and strong. You stand there with your little phone camera thinking you're some kind of journalist. But real journalism is about finding truth and sharing it with people. What truth are you sharing? What are you teaching people? Marcus looked around the room desperately, hoping someone would help him or support him. But every face he saw was either angry at him or completely focused on Robert. I'll tell you what you're teaching people, Robert continued. You're teaching them that it's okay to be cruel to others if it gets you attention. You're teaching them that old people don't deserve respect. You're teaching them that art and creativity don't matter as much as ratings and views. Robert took a step closer to Marcus, and Marcus backed up again until he was almost against the wall. But here's what you don't understand, son. The people watching your videos, the people who think it's funny when you attack someone like me, they're not really your fans. They're just people who are hurting inside, and seeing someone else get hurt makes them feel a little bit better about their own pain. This hit Marcus like a punch to the stomach. He had never thought about his audience this way, but he knew instantly that Robert was right. Real fans, Marcus, real audiences, they want to be inspired. They want to see something beautiful. They want to feel connected to something larger than themselves. They don't want to see an old man being bullied at a charity dinner. Robert looked directly into Marcus's phone camera again. And the saddest part is that you could be doing something better with your life. You have a communications degree. You have access to television. You have a platform that many people would love to have, but instead of using it to create something good, you use it to tear other people down. The room was so quiet that people could hear the sound of traffic outside on the street. You know what I was doing when I was your age, Marcus? I was working in a warehouse during the day and taking acting classes at night. I was reading books about great actors and directors. I was watching movies and trying to understand how they were made. I was building something. Robert's voice became softer, almost sad. I wasn't wasting my time trying to embarrass people who had more experience than me. I was trying to learn from them. I was trying to become worthy of working with them. Marcus felt smaller with every word. He wanted to run away, but he was trapped by his own phone camera and by the hundreds of people watching him. You came here tonight thinking you would make yourself famous by embarrassing me, Robert continued. But fame that comes from hurting others doesn't last, Marcus. It burns bright for a moment and then it's gone, and you're left with nothing but the memory of the pain you caused. Robert looked around the room at all the successful, accomplished people who had come to support the charity. Look around this room. Every person here has achieved something real. They've built businesses, created art, helped other people, made the world a little bit better. And they didn't do it by attacking anyone. They did it by working hard and treating others with respect. Robert turned back to Marcus. You could join them, you know. You could use your talents to build something instead of tearing things down. You could use your platform to highlight the good work that people are doing, instead of trying to destroy their reputations. For a moment, Robert's voice became almost gentle, like a father talking to a son who had made a terrible mistake. But first, you would have to learn something that nobody can teach you on television or in school. You would have to learn how to respect other people. You would have to learn that other people's feelings matter as much as your own ambitions. Marcus felt tears starting to form in his eyes. No one had ever talked to him this way. His parents had always told him he was special and that he deserved success. His bosses had always praised him for being aggressive and controversial. But Robert was showing him a completely different way of thinking about life and work. "The choice is yours, Marcus," Robert said. "You can keep doing what you're doing, attacking people and hoping for viral videos. Or you can decide to become the kind of person who builds something worthwhile with his life." Robert paused and looked directly at Marcus with eyes that were somehow both stern and kind. "But either way, you're going to have to live with the person you choose to become. And someday when you're my age, you're going to look back on your life and ask yourself, what did I build? What did I create? What good did I do in the world?" The room was completely silent as everyone waited to see what would happen next. "So I ask you now, Marcus Sterling," Robert said, his voice carrying the weight of 50 years of experience and wisdom, "what kind of man do you want to be?" The silence in the room stretched on for what felt like forever. Marcus Sterling stood frozen, his phone still recording, but his hand was shaking. Robert De Niro's question hung in the air like thunder after lightning. "What kind of man do you want to be?" Marcus looked around the room and saw 300 faces staring at him. But they were not staring at him the way they had been before. Earlier they had been watching him like he was entertaining. Now they were looking at him like he was a problem that needed to be solved. Marcus tried to speak, but no words came out. For the first time in his adult life, he had nothing to say. Robert's words had stripped away all of his confidence and left him feeling naked and ashamed. Robert saw the confusion and pain in Marcus's eyes, and his expression softened slightly. He had not enjoyed destroying the young man, but he had felt it was necessary. "I can see that you're thinking about what I said," Robert continued, his voice now gentle but still strong. "That's good. Thinking is the first step toward changing." Marcus finally found his voice, but it came out as a whisper. I don't know what to say." "Then don't say anything right now," Robert replied. "Just listen. And learn." Robert turned to face the crowd of people who had been watching the confrontation. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, his voice now carrying to every corner of the room, "I want to thank Mr. Sterling here for giving us all a very important lesson tonight." Marcus looked confused. "A lesson? What kind of lesson?" "You see," Robert continued, "Mr. Sterling has shown us something very valuable. He has shown us the difference between seeking attention and seeking to make a difference." The crowd listened carefully as Robert continued. "When Mr. Sterling came over to my table tonight, he was looking for attention. He wanted to create a moment that would make people notice him, and he succeeded. Everyone in this room is certainly noticing him now." A few people in the crowd made small laughing sounds, but they were not mean laughs. They were the kind of laughs that people make when they recognize an uncomfortable truth. "But what Mr. Sterling didn't realize," Robert said, "is that there are different kinds of attention. There's the attention you get from tearing other people down, and there's the attention you get from building something up." Robert gestured toward the students who had been watching from across the room. "Those young people over there, they're getting attention too. But they're getting it by working hard to develop their talents. They're getting it by learning to create something beautiful. They're getting it by becoming the kind of people who make the world better." The students felt proud and embarrassed at the same time. They had not expected to become part of Robert's speech. "So in a way," Robert continued, "Mr. Sterling has given us a gift tonight. He has reminded us all why we're really here." Marcus was more confused than ever. How was embarrassing him a gift to anyone? Robert seemed to read his thoughts. "We're here tonight to raise money for young artists, Marcus. We're here to help kids who want to learn how to tell stories, how to express themselves, how to create something meaningful with their lives." Robert's voice began to fill with passion again. "And your little performance tonight has reminded everyone in this room just how important that mission is. Because you've shown us what happens when someone has talent and opportunity, but no guidance about how to use them wisely." The crowd was beginning to understand where Robert was going with this, and people started to nod in agreement. "So I want to make an announcement," Robert said, his voice getting stronger. "I was planning to donate $25,000 to this charity tonight. But Mr. Sterling's demonstration of the importance of arts education has inspired me to double that donation. I'm now giving $50,000. The crowd erupted in applause. People stood up and cheered. Marcus felt like he was in some kind of strange dream where being humiliated had somehow turned into helping, charity. But Robert was not finished, and I want to challenge everyone else in this room to think about Mr. Sterling's contribution to our cause tonight. Robert continued over the applause. He has shown us all very clearly why it's so important to teach young people not just how to get attention, but how to deserve it. The applause got even louder. People were now applauding not just Robert's donation, but his entire handling of the situation. So I challenge everyone here to match Mr. Sterling's contribution, Robert said with a small smile. Let's see if we can turn this evening into the most successful fundraiser in this charity's history. Mrs. Catherine Williams was the first to respond. She stood up at her table and raised her hand. I'll match Mr. De Niro's $50,000 donation, she announced loudly. Her husband stood up next to her. So will I. Another $50,000? Soon people all over the room were standing up and announcing donations. The energy in the room had completely changed from uncomfortable tension to excited generosity. $25,000, $15,000, $30,000, $10,000. Sarah, the event organizer, was frantically trying to write down all the donation amounts. She could hardly believe what was happening. They had already raised more money in the last 5 minutes than they had hoped to raise all evening. Marcus stood in the middle of all this celebration, feeling completely lost. How had his attempt to embarrass Robert De Niro turned into the biggest charity fundraiser of the year? Robert walked over to Marcus, who was still holding his phone but had stopped recording. You know, Marcus, Robert said quietly so that only Marcus could hear him. You could learn something from this. Marcus looked at Robert with confused eyes. What do you mean? I mean that tonight, without meaning to, you helped raise more money for children's education than your TV show has probably raised for any cause in its entire existence. Marcus thought about this. It was true. His TV show had never helped anyone or raised money for anything important. The question is, Robert continued, do you want tonight to be an accident? Or do you want it to be the beginning of something better? Marcus looked around the room at all the happy, generous people who were still making donations and celebrating. Then he looked at the students who were watching everything with amazement and joy. For the first time all evening, Marcus saw these people not as an audience for his performance, but as human beings who cared about something bigger than themselves. I don't know how to be better, Marcus said quietly. Robert smiled. That's the first honest thing you've said all night, and it's also the most hopeful thing you've said. Robert patted Marcus gently on the shoulder. Learning how to be better is what life is about, son. And the fact that you want to learn means you're already on the right path. Marcus felt something he had never felt before. Instead of the temporary high he got from embarrassing people, he felt something deeper and more lasting. He felt like maybe he could become someone he could actually respect. What should I do now? Marcus asked. Robert thought for a moment. Well, you could start by apologizing to all these people for disrupting their charity dinner. Marcus looked terrified. What should I say? Just tell the truth, Robert said simply. Tell them you made a mistake and that you're sorry. Marcus walked slowly to the microphone at the front of the room. His legs felt shaky, but he knew Robert was right. Excuse me, Marcus said into the microphone. His voice cracked a little, but he continued. I want to apologize to everyone here tonight. I came here planning to hurt someone, and instead, all of you showed me what it looks like to help people. I'm sorry for being cruel, and I'm sorry for almost ruining your evening. The room was quiet as people listened to Marcus's apology. I don't have a lot of money to donate, Marcus continued, but I want to give what I can. I'll donate $5,000 to the charity. It was not a huge amount compared to what others had given, but for Marcus, it was a lot of money, and everyone could see that he was being sincere. The room filled with applause again, but this time it was different. This time people were applauding Marcus not for being entertaining, but for being honest. As Marcus walked back toward the exit, Robert called out to him. Marcus, Robert said, if you ever want to learn how to use that communications degree to build something instead of tearing things down, give me a call. I know some people who might be able to help you. Marcus turned around, and for the first time all evening he smiled a real smile. Thank you, Mr. De Niro, he said. I think I'd like that. As Marcus left the building, he pulled out his phone and looked at the video he had recorded. He watched himself attacking Robert De Niro, and then he watched Robert's incredible response. But instead of posting the video to embarrass Robert, Marcus did something different. He deleted it. For the first time in his career, Marcus Sterling chose to build something up instead of tearing something down, and it felt better than any viral video ever had. Back inside, the charity dinner continued with more joy and generosity than anyone had expected. By the end of the evening, they had raised over $500,000 for children's arts education. And Robert De Niro, the man who had been attacked for being irrelevant, had just created one of the most relevant moments of the entire year.